Please keep your comments specific to the current agenda item. Chat is not supported. First order of business is what we refer to as open forum. This is the part of the meeting where the public may comment on any topic not NOT on this current agenda. That floor is now open, and we'll keep a watchful eye on our people remotely here. Thanks, Roland. Anybody online? Anybody in the audience would like to speak? Now, not on something that's not on this agenda. Come forward then. I didn't see it. Oh, Julia. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. I just forwarded these comments and asked for them to be included in the record. I'm sorry I missed last month's meeting. I'm Julia McHugh. I live in the Palisades neighborhood in the West Plains. I'm living on a PFAS contaminated well. So, and I've been tracking the planning process, and I was able to review last month's notes regarding the draft EIS. That revised mapping is underway. I think that is one of the slivers in my side, because a lot of decisions are being made on outdated science and outdated documents, including the critical areas ordinance says, and I have attended many of these, and as far as I can tell, the planning process has already nailed down the UGA expansion and vacant land for housing without these updated documents or an understanding of the critical areas and the vulnerabilities that exist in these critical areas. We have a very threatened West Plains aquifer system, sole source wells. We don't have any options to our drinking water. So I continue to say this is the cart before the horse. Planning has effectively ignored the thousands of vacant square feet of commercial properties already being served with all necessary infrastructure. I want to do a reminder for this decision-making body to adhere to the state comp plan requirements to not just protect, but adhere to a baseline of do no harm to these 5 resources: critical aquifer recharge, wildlife conservation, geohazard areas, wetlands, and frequently flooded areas. We don't have any replacements for these resources, as you well know. The county continues to permit housing development in the West Terrace area, southeast of Medical Lake exit, where basement sump pumps run year-round and residents kayak in the spring melt streets. And on the northeast of the West Plains, where I live, development results in wetland filling and the further degradation of roads, wildlife habitat, and wildfire prevention, which we've had plenty of wildfires out there. This is the document attached to today's agenda from last week, I believe. Pages 13, 14, 15, you've got 3 matrices, extensive, listing letters from interested property owners, including the acres, the zoning, and all labeled no critical areas. How can you label property until you know what is critical? This is a bit of a fallacy in my book, and I ask you to really examine your thinking and update it, perhaps. A peculiar no mention of the S3R3 Solutions Public Development Authority. It's a city, the county, and the airport, roads, rails, and runways. And they are aimed at developing 9,000 acres around the airport, which is where the airport and Fairchild have claim of PFAS contamination throughout the West Plains. So you are not even considering what this public development authority is up to, including within that 9,300 acres that is wetlands. That when you squish the water, filling it with a slab or a warehouse or whatever they intend, that water goes somewhere, and that it gains contaminants and it recharges our wells. So you have to really, if you lived out here, you would know what I'm talking about. It's not just an academic exercise here. There are no citizens who are invited to review these draft documents. Those who have solid, detailed knowledge of impacts. I would like to be included. If you kindly include me, I think I could add to the conversation in a very helpful and knowledgeable way. Do you have any questions, comments, anything? Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McHugh.
Mr. Chairman, if I could take just a minute.
Okay.
We truly respect Julia's comments. We've participated and learned a lot from her and her neighbors on the West Plains. There is a lot going on still kind of behind the scenes. The critical areas ordinance is being updated from its 2017, 2018 version. The idea of critical areas is a big part of a UGA expansion. One of the criteria does say, it says centered in critical areas, and it's a benchmarking criteria early on to say if the center of a piece of property is in a critical area, it's excluded. That'll be more finely grained based on the conversation from all of you today and the board on Monday. But critical areas will be a determining factor for any particular growth areas. And to be very clear, there have been no determinations made on UGA expansion, whether there is expansion or not. And there's certainly no determination yet on the table on where it would go if in fact it's justified at all. So the concerns from Ms. McHugh are very valid. We are addressing them. We're certainly not ignoring them. We've tried many things to be better at public participation. We will continue to do so, and we will continue to invite her and her colleagues to comment on anything that we do, and we will welcome their participation.
Thank you, Scott.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Ms. McEwen mentioned the PDA.
Oh, yes.
And I just want to make sure that they are being included in these discussions and that they are subject to the same requirements of the Growth Management Act as everybody else is. Because I know there's a lot of money involved, and that's really important with those commercial interests out there.
Of course. They are involved to at least an initial early degree. I met with them last week to get just a sense of where they're going in terms of their own planning. We have agreed to meet again after the first of the year when we have a better sense of some of our growth aspects. To kind of be clear on a point though, S3R3, even though it's a PDA, is not technically subject to the Growth Management Act. However, anything they do that involves permits comes through us or the city, which is involved in the Growth Management Act. So the filter is still there for anything they want to do.
Other question? Anyone else would like to add the podium for things that are not on this agenda? If not, we will proceed to the workshop. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, as Churchill might say, the end of the beginning. We've been looking at a lot of things over the last couple of years related to basic growth, and we're at a point where we have to make some decisions on how we could accommodate that growth over this next 20-year period, and notably in the next 5-year period to be sensitive to the markets. As you've heard before, we're using the environmental impact system or statement process to do that with 3 alternatives. One, a no action alternative, which is to say if the county makes no changes to its development regulations or adds 0 land for future development, can it accommodate its 35,000 person growth? Second alternative is, can we simply change the development regulations and accommodate that growth within the existing borders? And the third alternative, alternative 2, is reflecting some degree of new zoning characteristics for areas within the UGA, as well as some potential for expanding outside of the UGA if necessary by reflecting development patterns that have been in place for roughly the last 25 years. What this slide does is it outlines a potential scenario 3, and it's outside of the bookends, as it says. So if you made a recommendation, or if the county board decided to pick an option beyond this range, it would trigger an additional level of study to go back into the environmental impact side. By doing it as bookends with all infill little growth, anything that gets selected as a preferred alternative in between will fall within that study, and we can keep this thing going on time. Today, we're going to be talking about the details of Alt 2. On September 11th, we had a pretty extensive meeting on Alternative 1, what that infill alternative looks like. And then October 30th, we went through the basics of Alt 2. And today's aspect is to dig into the details. We've got some potential maps. We have the study areas that have been recommended by analysis, as well as those coming through. Jumping ahead of myself, sorry. As you've seen some of these criteria before, I want to go back to this before we went over it. One of the major efforts of this round of Growth Management Act planning is related to housing affordability, notably at the area median income and under. As we've noted for you in the past GMA guidance was provide for affordable housing, and almost that succinct. The legislature has changed that to work on these housing by income bands from 0 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, 80 to 100, and beyond. That means the plan must make accommodation for development that is affordable for some family or household in those ranges. Excuse me, that's difficult top to bottom. It's very difficult for counties because what we do for growth and development is inherently suburban. It's on the edges of cities. Many of these more traditional affordable opportunities are within cities, sometimes central cities where they're closer to transit, closer to social services, community services, traditional housing providers. So this is a very significant challenge for counties. What that leads us to think about, though, are really kind of the last two bullets on this, which are, again, they're not really unique. They just haven't been done here before. But it's, for example, right now, if you've got a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet, and that lot has changed in price over the last 4 years from $60,000 to $200,000, there's no way the economics will work out that anything affordable could be built on that. However, if you eliminate the lot sizes entirely, let architects and builders figure out a solution, we're at least opening the door to having an ownership opportunity at those lower levels. Probably not under 50%, but maybe in the 50 to 80, 80 to 100, which would be a big step toward offering more neighborhood stability to families that would otherwise be stuck in renting forever. And so eliminating some of the barriers to that is what this Alt 2 is all about. You see this a couple of times. We're putting it up here to reflect what a new development would look like if we were able to take, say, a 40-acre piece of land and look at it in a new light other than simply as low-density residential in its past life. With the range of housing units and structures from single-family detached to attached townhomes to stacked flats to even some modest true multifamily, 9 to 12 unit buildings, for example. They could have the live-work opportunity where a storefront on the ground floor and a proprietor living above. Those could be retail, they could be professional services, they could be volunteer opportunities. It also talks about connectivity. If you don't ask for or require street connectivity, you end up with subdivisions that have one way in, sometimes maybe one way out, a lot of cul-de-sacs. You saw that in some of our earlier presentation. You reduce even pedestrian circulation because you can't get from one place to another within your own subdivision. You make it harder on emergency vehicles to get through because they have to plan which route they get to a particular cul-de-sac instead of having a grid to go make that access. So this is the version we're asking you to consider for new construction on larger parcels of land. And then what we're looking at in that is generally 3 areas, and the target is mostly the West Plains. And this gets to what Ms. McHugh said before. If we're doing this kind of development into that neighborhood residential concept, It means we're looking at the entire range of development impacts for us for a plat. Right now, that doesn't happen. The plat simply says, or with the public works review on the plat simply says you must abide by the county stormwater manual. It's not really a lot of guidance. Here it helps lay that out. Where do you build retention ponds? Where do you use potentially retention ponds as parks? So it gives us a chance to better handle the wide range of development than our current system does. Got 3 areas on the West Plains that we want to talk through, and then Paul, or at least give you a chance to comment on this. This is the kind of the north eastern part of the West Plains. In the center of that, roughly where the label says West Plains Thorpe UGA, is a series of parcels of land that you would have seen a couple of years ago as Comprehensive Plan Amendment 22-2. It was a 110-acre mixed-use recommendation that was ultimately withdrawn because the complications of mitigation were significant, notably from DOT. This is an approach that would let that mix of multifamily and business happen, but with a series of design controls and design requirements. So it's better buffering its neighbors. It has a better quality of life. It would take advantage of a wetland in the middle of that property as an amenity, not as something to be paved over for a parking lot. And it provides some unifying effect for infill development on some of the existing residential parcels. Moving to the southwest, again, you've seen comprehensive plan amendments in here for the last 2 years. A couple of those darker orange areas were medium density residential changes from low density or from light industrial. And again, to be short, the 2005-2007 period where residential platting was allowed in light industrial still shows up in here. We're not necessarily recommending wholesale changes of light industrial land to neighborhood residential. Most of what's up there is already platted in residential densities during that period. So in some cases, we're map correcting as well. But by letting it fill in with the neighborhood zone, we're encouraging those mix of uses. So there's a chance that you can have small businesses and encourage. The other thing this will encourage is small shops and potentially markets. Now, Spokane is a little bit unique in my experience in that some of these small markets are truly viable here. It's like 5,000 square foot, something between a C-store or a C-store without pumps. That's a really unique thing because in so many other areas, the old adage, retail follows rooftops. You need 1,000 homes before anybody will consider building a market. Here that number is a little bit smaller. So we think this neighborhood approach can work. And then perhaps most importantly to many of us, and especially those that already live in the West Terraces and this is the southern part of the West Plains, again, that was developed with very little restriction, very little guidance, very little control. Can it develop in the future? Frankly, we don't know until we get a better sense of the critical areas, whether those densities or even development should be in this area. But if it can, knowing that we're preserving critical areas, using them as open space, using them as parks, protecting existing ponds that could be used as wetlands, it's trying to bring all of that together. So what we're saying is the neighborhood residential zone can be a chance to bring these various constraints together to create urban design that fits the area, fits the ecology of the area, as well as improves transportation access, improves quality of life for folks out there. So you've seen that in concept before. Happy to take any questions before we move on. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is not a public hearing yet, but you are welcome to take at any time, reflect or recognize the public if there are comments that you think can add value to your deliberations.
Understand, we've noted this is a workshop. Thank you.
Scott, I have a question. On all the 3 maps you've shown us here, how much jurisdiction or influence does the outlining parameter of Airway Heights have on this, or on these areas, or I haven't seen a map showing.
Oh, it's a good question, and it's kind of, I guess I'd have a two-part answer. The easy answer in the short run is Airway Heights is in the collaborative process of understanding how to grow within or outside of the UGA. And that volume of growth factors into what would happen out here, kind of regardless of municipal boundaries. The second part is Airway Heights, Cheney, Medical Lake, City of Spokane, and us have started a process for 2027 of creating a sub-area plan for the greater West Plains area. That's a process that goes beyond the UGAs. It goes beyond, it would create an area, or it would look at an area along the lines of what you might have seen with Chad Pritchard's work, where that West Plains study area was defined out past Deep Creek, down around to Cheney and back around. Right. And so to look at that entire area in a context that can help understand what's there that needs to be preserved and protected, and outside of the comp plan itself, but provides some guidance and ability of all of those communities to weigh in a common project. Hasn't been done here before. The cities are all agreeing to do it. There will be some formality and interlocal agreements and bureaucracy necessary, but I'm encouraged by the fact that that's going to be a follow-on exercise to the plan.
I follow up on that question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. With that being said, that's encouraging because the influence of the city of Airway Heights and all the Medical Lake, I mean, they all affect this area. Because even the aquifer, because they have a different aquifer than we have here.
Right.
So I'm encouraged to hear, is this all going to happen before the June of 2026?
No. What will happen in this plan is, and I don't say that to be flippant. No. The comprehensive plan update that we're doing now is the statutory required one, and it has guidelines. Had that effort started 4 years ago, we might have made more progress for each of our plans. But Airway Heights has literally finished up their planning work this year. So they've got their new plan, on the shelf. Medical Lake is doing the same thing. Cheney did its land capacity analysis 2 years ahead of everybody else. So we have those disconnected pieces in the 26 calendar chapter. Rather than try to reopen all that and potentially slow us down and make people think, well, wait a minute, we did this in good faith. Why is the county asking us to redo it? And we don't want to be the gorilla here. So that's why we approached it with them and said, let's think about this as the follow-on piece of work so that we can talk about this comprehensively. But it'll be a 27, 28 effort.
With that being said, then will we at the county still be able to meet the expectations of the maker of the UGA?
Well,
state level is what I'm referring to.
The easy answer is yes. That's what we're doing. And like I said, today is at end of the beginning part of that, because you and the board will maybe make some definitive guidance for the EIS study going forward. We will continue to work with all of the communities and the residents and the interested parties on the West Bank at every step as this moves forward. And as a kind of a point of note, while we're focusing on the UGA today because it's time, we've been spending 2 years on this, all of the other elements that are part of that comprehensive plan, the GMA required elements, I've been slowly working their way in the background with policy analysis and policy audits. All of that comes back to life in January, while the EIS chugs along February, March. And so a chance to talk to all of our constituents about transportation planning, about housing planning, about parks and open space individually by chapter will all start in a robust way after the first of the year.
Just a few questions. So, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me.
We can go back and forth on maps if you'd like.
I just am concerned that I haven't really seen any commentary from Medical Lake or Cheney School District, Airway Heights, on this West Plains work. I know that there's perception that there's a lot of vacant land out there or underutilized lots. But that doesn't mean that it's actually financially or fiscally sensible to develop or environmentally sensible to develop. There's some unique factors to consider with wetlands, perched aquifer, whatever, and runoff in various situations because there's a lot of slopes out there, especially in this area. And I don't know, I mean, without seeing that work from those jurisdictions, I'm not sure how they're setting with this. And I'm concerned that it's going forward without hearing from them. On what they know, like you said, they're ahead of Spokane County and taking care of their business with their comprehensive planning. And I'm concerned that because it's true, the comprehensive plan does not set regulations, but it sets the foundation for them. And so once that's in place, the regulatory framework will go forward based on that. And so I would like to see more information from those jurisdictions, and I would like to see more environmental information about this. And I just want to make sure before we go ahead and go to the BOCC, Board of County Commissioners, that we have done all of our due diligence with information that we're getting. So, and I have some drill down questions on what you presented before, but this big picture is very concerning to me, particularly for the West Plains, but maybe for all of those out there, Meade and further south of us. So just, and I know I did make that late request to Rona, like, okay, is this online? Because I can't find it. So just a quick touch on that would be really appreciated.
I understand that. And let me address all of that as quickly as we can. We have had through the PTAC group, all the planners for Elroy Heights, Medical Lake, Cheney, have been part of these discussions continuously. The steering committee met yesterday to hear a version of this, so we've had a chance for all of the electeds also to weigh in, including Airway Heights. I don't think anyone from Cheney was there, but we've also had one-on-one conversations with Airway Heights, with Medical Lake on where they want to grow, how we can help them grow. Larry Bowman, the Airway Heights mayor, attended yesterday, and he kind of asked that same thing: what are we out here by ourselves? And I said, we have had conversations, ongoing with your planning department about the county being as supportive as we can for Airway Heights growth, because we know the constraints that they're under from the Air Force on 3 sides and from mining and mineral extraction on the east and north sides. So they're a very challenging thing to grow. And we've got more on that coming up in the next chapter. But the conversations are happening with all of those parties as part of our work. What we will do for you after this meeting is we will send you the current information and plans we have from all of our supporting communities. Deer Park wants to publish their final plan this December instead of waiting till next December. They're pretty much along on that. We'll talk about their UGA in a minute. Airway Heights is adopting their, I think that's their 2023 plan, and they're calling it, that's going to be their 26 update. We'll send you that. Medical Lake, I don't know that they have a formal plan draft in process yet, but we will send you the information that we have on that so you can kind of see where there has been some level of collaboration. We are committed to having that collaboration, particularly on the West Plains, where there are those multiple cities and lands in between to handle, that should be talked about to everybody's benefit. Other thoughts? Moving on. The version of infill development that we look at for areas within the UGA but within this new zoning case classification. And this is a version, instead of neighborhood residential, we call it neighborhood commercial. And the distinction is subtle but important. In neighborhood residential, if you remember that sketch, it is predominantly a residential neighborhood that has some amenities, services, amenities, businesses within it that are walkable, small scale, low intensity. This is the opposite, where you've got an existing commercial area that could have fairly high intensity businesses, but around it right now are generally nothing but parking fields, and usually big ones, 300-400 cars or more. This is a way of saying, and then these two sketches are from our collaborative effort with STA on North Division Corridor. To the upper, on the sketch on the left, the upper right quadrant is Rockwood Retirement. The upper left quadrant is Whitworth University. So you get a sense of context, but this version would allow more intense residential development to go into these commercial cores, and designed better so that they interacted. Could be shared parking services. It could be some combination of structured and surface parking. It could, again, have little or no parking requirements because, in a case like this, it's on a major transit line. And so this is the other infill thing that will change the way we can accommodate some growth with higher densities, but also with design standards so that there's a quality of life, quality of development that's different than just a multifamily building plopping down in an apartment house next to a big box store. This area we're considering, at least in the study version, is predominantly the North Metro UGA. This plan view is essentially the same area you saw on the sketch here. Rockwood to the upper right, Whitworth to the upper left. And you can see the various zoning categories that are in here today, from low density residential to medium to high density to commercial to mixed use. This neighborhood commercial would replace all of that and have a unified approach so that all of those uses could go in there, but they wouldn't have hard separate boundaries anymore. They'd have integrated areas between the two. And this would continue into Hastings, Farwell corridor, where, again, you have seen in the last 4 years, at least 3, if not 4, comp plan amendments that have moved low density residential lands into medium and high density along this corridor. That is a clear market trend. And so this neighborhood commercial can help understand that. So property owners can plan accordingly, investment can plan for that on a basis of not having to ask for comp plan amendments every year. And it presents a set of design and development guidelines so that the people who live and work there can start to see that as a kind of a distinct neighborhood, not just as another stop sign on Newport Highway. And then moving out to the further part, this is frankly going to be one of the more interesting places of growth, at least in the next 5 to 10 years. Meadworks is the mixed use project off to the right behind Costco. Multicare and Shriners Hospital have that combined 40 acres to the east of Costco along Newport Highway. STA is planning a transit station adjacent to the Multicare facility on the south side of Newport Highway. That little part of the sketched out area at the far northeast corner is essentially a piece of DOT right-of-way rather than a legal parcel. We are working with DOT to help them recruit a master developer for a mixed-use project on that parcel that could have, reflecting the fact that you're going to have this major medical center across the street that's going to be an employment center and other things. And so the idea, again, try to plan this in a way that that integrates all of those other relatively high intensity uses into a neighborhood that is transitioning over time. The big red triangle across from Costco on an older plan is a commercial piece of land that had one possible option as mini storage. Good economic sense, but if you're looking now at all of this stuff happening, is there a higher and better use to that? And that's, those are the kind of things that we also talk about with the landowners and developers. It's like, here's what's happening around you. You want to rethink what you might have planned 10 years ago on that site. So this is the infill side of it rather than kind of the new construction. And we're focusing on those two areas, the kind of the new part of it on the West Plains and the infill part here in the North Metro. So, thoughts? Well, you look very serious.
I just have a curiosity question. The purple area there, which is just to the north of the old Kaiser,
Yes.
there's a stream coming out of there and contamination was a big issue. Has that been pretty well taken? I mean, that was just, we were talking about environmental issues.
As far as I know, yes. But when I first found out about that a couple of years ago, that was very scary. Because yes, it comes
Yeah,
right through there and
yep.
drops into another creek that goes up into the little Spokane River.
Right.
And that's one like the definition of terrible contamination from the 60s and 70s.
Yep.
To our knowledge, that has been cleaned up, and any remaining groundwater or contamination issues are managed through ponds and wells and monitoring wells. I don't know the specifics on that. I'm guessing that both Greenstone and Multi-Care did their due diligence to check that. But that would certainly be a huge issue to make sure that at least the stream across the way that is the tributary to the Little Spokane is protected.
Thank you.
Other thoughts? Moving on. Here, for the rest of this, we're going to talk about opportunities for growth on our edges. Oh, Rona, I'm sorry.
Who's on the line? Yeah, unrated.
Okay, well, they're welcome to come back at any time.
Keep an eye out for us. Thank you.
Moving on, now we need to look at what are the opportunities if we feel we do not have enough land to accommodate historic growth in the existing urban growth areas. The RCW gives us guidance. I paraphrased this badly with the steering committee yesterday, so I wanted to make sure we put it up accurately today. But what it talks about is, you go past that? We did, sorry. How you go about considering expanding your UGA. And you can see the guidance here is pretty direct and simple. It says, try to find ways of accommodating growth within that urban growth area using your existing infrastructure to the degree you can. If it is not feasible or appropriate based on the evidence that we examine, then you can consider expansion. So this is the benchmark in the RCA, the first hurdle to consider, or the first benchmark, I should say. The second part then is if we're going to review that, if they're going to be putting pressure on future development, you have to follow, at the very least, these 8 criteria. And again, this comes from the RCW directly. So these are the first set of filters or standards that our staff use to evaluate map parcels that are on the edge of the current urban growth area. Looking at all of these particular elements, that led to an additional series of local requirements. And the top 4 we ultimately considered to be required, and the others were optional. And then there's a third tier that we're going to talk about at the end of this first session. But had to touch it, had to be within some proximity of the existing major road. We picked a starting size of 10 acres, somewhat arbitrary, but the point was if you feel you have to expand the urban growth area, it probably doesn't make sense to do it in 2-acre and 5-acre chunks because the simple unit cost of infrastructure is going to be much higher on those smaller parcels. And to get it at Ms. McHugh's issue, they can't be centered in a critical area. The optional ones, taking advantage of the urban reserve zone that our predecessors and some of you on this commission adopted for anticipating future growth. That's what they should be. And then we added a couple. The idea of adding a transit layer in here as an optional feature. And then, when we say a UGA region experiencing more growth, that is another way of putting what's the pattern of growth? Where's the path of growth? Where are development pressures been over the last 5 to 10 years? And should that be a factor in moving this along? And then the last consideration was feasibility for immediate action. There's very little point in going through this exercise if you pick a parcel and a landowner is reserving that for future generations or for whatever reason. And so the landowners and agents that submitted letters to us of interest saying we're ready to go, when we get through these pieces, that becomes a guiding part of like, yeah, okay, this can happen in the next 5 years. You can, yes.
So how come you guys wouldn't want to go less than 10 acres on a couple of things? Because if we can incorporate that in, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at 2.5 or 5 acres, I mean, that type of money is going to cost less for other people to invest into, opposed to buying 10.
Good clarification. We use 10 as a starting point because of finding, trying to identify 25 or 30,000 parcels individually is beyond our scope. So we picked a benchmark of starting. What we're going to be asking you to do in the next few minutes is start to look at some maps that have these identified and say, well, there's the 10-acre parcel, but should it really be a 30-acre accommodation with these 2-3 acres and this 5-acre parcel? Should there be a bigger part of that study area? And then that will provide some guidance for us. But this provides kind of a seed based on quantitative analysis that we can ultimately defend in front of a hearings board if we have to. So that was a starting point. It's not the ending point. The ending point is where you look at that in your own experience and saying, well, this may not make any sense, but if you added these two pieces, now you've got something that might work. So, and to add on to that little sidebar comment up there are two major things that go into looking at growth areas in the concurrency world that is part of GMA. And they're generally related to capital facilities, sewer and water, and transportation. And by the way, I'd take a sidebar step back from that. Melissa, you mentioned also before schools. We now have a quarterly meeting with all of the Spokane County superintendents. They meet together every month. We talk to them quarterly about progress on the plan. What's their district? Here's the growth going in your direction. We also met with the fire chiefs a month ago, and actually we met with Fire District 9 on Tuesday night to show them, here's what's happening in the North Metro area that's affecting your district. Can you handle this kind of infill? Can you understand where this growth is going on the outside? So those are not required steps for concurrency, but we're taking them because they haven't been done before and they make sense from the planning perspective. You brought that up, and I wanted to address that. That comes into play in this sense. We did an initial assessment with our wastewater division and a follow-up with Liberty Lake Sewer and Water, who are the two real major providers in the areas we plan for. I mean, other than the city, and that's a separate part. Liberty Lake they built a facility that can handle 8 million gallons a day. They currently use 2 million gallons a day. They have enormous capacity. The county facility was built to handle 8 million gallons a day. It's operating at about 7.5, but the county also has capacity reserved in the city's Riverside treatment facility, and we're not using much more than about 1/3 of that capacity. And so our wastewater team suggested that the county's system could absorb at least 60 or 70,000 new residents before it had to expand. That is more than twice or 3 times the likely growth we're going to have in the 20-year period. So what we did with that number was we took sewer availability off the table for the first round of evaluations. Transportation and that sewer accessibility comes in this next round, because it's one thing to know you've got capacity at the treatment plant. Now we've got to say, how far is the nearest interceptor from this? Is it 100 yards? Is it 600 yards? Is it a mile? And that has an enormous impact on the capital facility costs of making something feasible. So that level of analysis will happen as we go into the EIS. But I wanted to recognize that we didn't use that detail up front just because we had, well, think of it in this way. if we're only going to expand something in a limited way, going through and trying to study 20,000 or more parcels in a detailed fashion would take 10 times the staff that we have available to pull that forward. So we had to filter this down to move it forward in some way. So next step, the maps you have seen before and we'll share again today in a refined way, identified 2,800 acres or thereabouts as potentially eligible land based on the criteria you saw in the last 3 slides. We know from our own land capacity analysis that is well beyond what the county needs to grow. There is capacity in the urban growth areas now. We need to use that up. What we did is a kind of a benchmark analysis that said it's like the no growth alternative. If you don't change your zoning rules and regulations in any way, and you grow at the same rate and style that you've been growing for 20 years, what does that do? Well, it uses up the lands in the UGA, both the truly vacant or what's defined as vacant and what's defined as underutilized. And the underutilized is it's a different thing. And you probably will hear later from members of the home builders or others that the underutilized category may not be as accurate as it should be. But nonetheless, we would use that up and need somewhere between 300 and 400 acres of new available land to accommodate our growth in the 20-year period. We took that number as an outlier and said, okay, if we have to refine 2,800 acres down to 300 or 400, where do we start? And that then moved into this approach, which added another layer of sort of quantitative or qualitative analysis. Which of these parcels is already near certain things that we would want to encourage in that neighborhood zone, whether it's neighborhood residential, neighborhood commercial? Are they in fact closer to transit stops? Is there some other qualitative aspect that might help share where this would be a good place to move and study, capital facilities and infrastructure? And then the last one was that path of development or parcels with what we call catalytic value. There's something to be said for adding a 2-acre or 3-acre parcel by itself that it could do this thing. But if there was a 10 or 20-acre parcel in this area that might not qualify for everything else, it might qualify for 5 of the 7, but it's in a way that could be a transportation connector or preserve some part of a critical area, that would have a catalytic effect that we want to study. Does that make sense?
Kind of. So a couple of things. When you're talking about the potential for catalytic development, if I had bought silver during the Hunt Brothers debacle, I would have been destitute and on the streets for the last, I don't know how many years now. And I have seen this with a lot of speculative purchases and development in community, holding on to parcels that have a speculative interest for them.
Right.
And they don't develop,
Correct.
period.
This
So-
is not that.
I
Right.
just want to caution against that going, well, that looks like it's gonna be, in an area that blah, blah, blah. And then it doesn't happen for whatever reason. Things go the other way or they go that way. And then the community ends up short,
Absolutely.
basically. So, and also I understand your conundrum about changing the development expectations in the county and the suburban areas. But is there a potential for not only minimum lot sizes, but maximum lot size so that we're not hung up with, oh, it's gotta be 5,000 to 10,000 square feet per whatever?
Well, we have not considered that chiefly because of our mandate, if you will, or at least our emphasis of trying to have more compact urban walkable development, even in this new neighborhood zone. That said, there is still nothing, and this is where the market gets in the way of GMA. We could identify that 40-acre piece of land and say, this is a great place for this neighborhood development to take place. It gives it the UGA, unless we're either upfront with the property owner saying, or conditionally approving something, recommending it, which the GMA doesn't like, you run the risk of, okay, you put this 40 acre in here and I can do whatever I want. And we've got to be careful about that. So when I say catalytic, it's not meant on speculative development per se. It's more meant on the example of, is this a parcel that can connect two pieces of transportation that need to be connected that provide some benefit to the bigger area? Or does it have some other public catalytic effect that could be there? The private speculative side, I've spent my entire private career working in that world. So we know what it looks like, we know what it sounds like, we know what it smells like. This is not meant to be, let's speculate. It's meant to say, is there some piece that fits the puzzle that would otherwise not be eligible? So, but it's one we will be very careful with going forward. We should. So where does that leave us? We have our major areas to look at. You can see the legend is still kind of small, but the darker colors, the red represents 6 and 7 criteria met. The green represent that what we're now calling the potential study areas, meaning these are the parcels that fall into that last category of more qualitative analysis that would be the first choice for moving forward. And so there are some in that north metro area, a couple of larger ones, some right off of Newport Highway, one in the 5 Mile Prairie, but adjacent to others. And then there's a piece here that's important to realize, which I don't think this will help illustrate, it won't. But if you see above the label Shawnee UGA, there are 4 parcels there, 2 square, 2 rectangular, just to be kind of clear about those. 3 rectangular ones to the west. Those 3 represent plats that date to in the 1990s. Our predecessors had written a determination that they had expired past their 5-year shelf life with no request for renewal. However, new developers, landowners brought those back and requested a hearing that validity. And the hearing examiner in 22, I believe, maybe 23, found that they were in fact fully entitled because they were a counter complete application. So they found that the application vested them. I'd not seen that before, but so be it. As we were in discussions with FutureWise and the various plaintiffs from the settlement agreement, they were somewhat understandably upset with the county because it's like, well, you must have concealed these. Didn't tell us this was happening. And we said, no, in fact, here's the letter saying we wrote that they expired. The long and short is those will be in the UGA because sort of the outside part of that settlement agreement is it's something that was entitled and here must go into the UGA because it's where it belongs. So those will go in there. And they don't factor into our analysis because of that. Which means the ones next to them, which are vacant, and then the white space is a school. So it elevates their profile, if you will, a little bit in terms of future evaluation. And that's kind of a unique niche out here. There's no other place where there's this automatic entry into the UGA. But thinking of this, what are your initial thoughts about what's going on here?
I happened to be on the board at that time when those came across. And part of it at the time was why they were kind of poo-pooed was the emergency vehicle getting to the sites. And I assume that has all been corrected, I assume, by the city. Is that? I'm just asking questions. That's why
there have been east-west road improvements up there in the last 10 years. Are they adequate? That in one case, that's what we'll find out in the study.
Okay. It made sense at the time to happen, but
what we've heard from landowners out there is that, and this is all zoned urban reserve, but some of it was still used in some kinds of low impact ag. Yep. But with transportation improvements, like roundabouts, 5 Mile Road, it's now very difficult to move agricultural equipment in and out of the area. So, it's another area that is shifting over time. And the question is, with all those parcels, do we try to plan for that now, or do we do it in sort of an ad hoc basis, which we've done in the past? The ones on the northeast side are a little bit more disconnected from the road networks, but they provide different opportunities. What this map doesn't show is also what's called the North Mead Lammard, which is off to the east of the Mead airstrip. That's where the new North 40 is going, where the old North 40 is just up the road from it on Newport Highway. That Lammard is being left alone in this analysis. That's another 27 or 28 affected. We've talked with Commerce about that. Should it be in its own UGA? And right now we're looking at it and saying that's a really complicated thing to do, and we don't want to derail the 26 plan to handle that. But there is essentially an urbanized area off to that corner. If not, we can move on, Mr. Chairman. We go to the valley. And we recognize it's a big maps, and some of these parcels look very small that way, but kind of going clockwise, there's a target parcel as part of a request to move north on Argonne Road up toward Bigelow Gulch. This is an area that was challenging for the county in 2015 and was ultimately removed from the future UGA at that time. One of the questions we'll have in the analysis is the time ripe to reconsider that? To be sure, the completion of Bigelow Gulch Road over 20 years is now providing a major east-west corridor through there that will drive development pressure. So the question is, do we again try to advance good planning ahead of that or not? And remember, all of these decisions and thoughts that you provide, and as the board provides guidance, these are going into a study. These are not recommendations to say, yep, that parcel, we want that in the UGA. It's like, let's study to see if it makes sense to go in there. So I do want to be clear that nothing said today is to be inferred as a recommendation from staff or from you. Anyway, moving clockwise, there's another plat where you can see the Valley UGA on the upper right corner of the screen. The gray spot in the middle is developed. That was a 1993 plat. The plat to the west of that, between that and the red area, is actually in our office with a request to reactivate it because it was in fact entitled in 1993. And so, among other things, we had to go back into our archives and find the 1993 zoning book to say whether the rules that are going to govern the development of this. And that applicant is also now reconsidering whether they want to start over with the current zoning rules, which would allow 6 to 8 units an acre, as opposed to the 93 pre-GMA urban zoning, and that's generally platted at 1 acre lots or slightly above that. And that's 1 acre lot's a very expensive thing to build right now, at least by itself. But it's there. Moving down, the other red and green parcel are generally vacant lands, except for the area between the red and the river to its southwest, which is somewhat developed in small lots up against the water. Those are generally vacant lands. A Vista has the upper part of that as you get up near Trent Road off of Barker. And then parcels on Harvard Road across the river north of Liberty Lake. Moving around to the southeast, right about where the legend box is, to its left is the Saltese Flats area. There have been some development issues and pressures in there over the last few years. There was a UGA swap that involved the high school a couple of years ago. And so there's actually a UGA island in there. So in one of those potentially catalytic aspects is, can we reconnect that island to the other UGA in a way that makes sense for future development? And that would be kind of the red and gold parcels that are in that particular area. The white parcel right in the middle of that cluster is a fully developed neighborhood subdivision that is not in the UGA. In 2015, Spokane County did or tried what they called right sizing the UGA, which was to recognize these places that had developed, in most cases platted pre-GMA, and just put them in the UGA. That approach, and I don't know to what analytical level the county went to at that point. That approach was rejected by the hearings board. And so one of the things we're not doing is trying to reinvent that particular approach. It doesn't, again, it doesn't seem worth the risk if we've got a better way of handling our growth that we can defend. What we would certainly want to do, though, is work with advocacy groups and others to say between 27 and 31, should we be looking at changing the structure of this in some future way? But those, like I said, those are literally fully developed. As you move along back, some parcels on the edge of the Valley UGA meet most of these criteria and would be considered for study. Any thoughts on this one before we move away?
I'm kind of confused because I probably am not remembering this correctly. Are there no sunset provisions?
On a plat?
Yeah,
It's a 5-year. A plat lives for 5 years unless it's extended. I've not heard of a plat, and you know, it's not exactly professional of us, but I call it the zombie plat. It kind of came back to life somehow.
yeah, some of these are pretty old.
93?
Yeah,
Yes. It's like the very birth of GMA. There's always something new in our business, and sometimes it's something really old that becomes new. Like how do we deal with this? And then again, you can see coming up past Pimes Road, Highway 27, again, scattered parcels in there. Lots of small parcels, and that gets to be pretty rugged area, so there's not much outside of it. We're moving on a little bit to the west. This is the southeast part of the city of Spokane, Moran Prairie, Glen Rose area. 57th runs along east-west. Glen Rose runs up, bends, and comes Carnahan up the north. A lot of individual potential in here. In a way, you know, if you think of a UGA expansion as where do we want to grow for 20 years, and can we put 120? Can we put a quarter section of land out here and develop that over that period of time? This is almost an infill strategy that you would consider. So these areas are very likely going to have adequate infrastructure because they're literally attached to an existing growing area. So this will be an interesting area to study. The challenge in and out of the UGA, this is in now the city's water and sewer area. And so they play a role not just as the neighboring government, they play a role as the utility provider. And so one of our questions in the analysis is, can and will the city provide utilities for these areas? And let me go back one slide. It doesn't quite show it. There's some interest in properties right about under the title slide on this. And in looking at the very early analysis, those parcels are abutting parcels currently served by the county's wastewater system. And so that would be served to the north, everything from essentially 29th Avenue where the curves are above the Alcott, that would be in the city of Spokane's sewer and water area. So this is actually a split of service areas on the top part of that.
quick comment.
Yes.
The transportation infrastructure up there is inadequate,
We've noticed.
I'm sure. So is
Uh,
everybody else.
It is maybe untenable is not a professional way of putting it. Regal is overwhelmed, and there's still room, so to speak, for development. And Regal is, well, again, Regal is right. In the city's comprehensive plan, in the early teens, there was the Ray Freya bypass that was designed to take traffic from Ray at 37th, curve it through the school district and bring it around to Freya, and then have Freya be improved to the south. The city took that off of their comprehensive plan in like 2013 or 2014. So for the moment, it's dead. But if you look at Freya trying to be the reliever of this, It would be a political nightmare. It is a fully developed urban street from 37th all the way down to the freeway. And that would require it would require DOT style real estate acquisition to make that anything more than it is now. So the transitions out here don't happen easily. Glen Rose, Carnahan, they're still, for the most part, country roads, but that's the nearest north-south corridor. And when Carnahan comes down, it hits, the freeway and you're done. You're on the freeway frontage road. So there are no good transportation solutions north-south in this area to accommodate expanding growth, which will be a limiting factor in the study. And then moving out, you can see on the lower right side of the screen a little bit of that area, but also there's a group of parcels on the west side of 195 right at Hatch Road. They're red and orange. That is a set of parcels in unified ownership that could in fact be take advantage of this neighborhood residential zone and create something of an urban village. The challenge on the surface of it is back to transportation again. DOT has been concerned about every possible new car touching 195, chiefly because of the ramp onto eastbound I-90. We gave them a $20 million solution. They didn't like that, but be that as it may. And transportation mitigation out here is really significant. One of the things about that set of parcels, though, is if you sort of follow your eye over and get to the Medical Lake interchange on I-90, comes off to the south is Arrow Road. And if you take the line of Arrow Road straight east, there's one or two parcels in that entire stretch that are that would be split by that if there were a road there. Otherwise, there's nothing but parcels that touch each other. So if you were going to think of where would you put an east-west road with the least amount of financial and impact on property owners, there's almost a built-in corridor there for study and to think about. The challenge, of course, is the last mile, the last half mile on the east side, where you hit the railroads, you hit topography, and you get to very expensive kind of infrastructure if you want to tie that back into 195. Doesn't mean we should avoid it. Planning is about sometimes identifying things that are hard and saying, you need to think about this, and more importantly, you need to reserve the opportunity to do this in the future if you can figure out a way to make it happen and pay for it. North Spokane corridor being the best example of that. It took, 50 years more? But if it wasn't on the map, it would have never happened. A lot of parcels on what would be the southwest side of the existing West Plains UGA. You can see them in red, yellow, orange. Those are they're identified here, but they are not candidates for UGA expansion because we're looking chiefly at residential growth here, not at business growth in this model. Those are right off the main runway at SIA. The terrible place to put new residential. So that's going to be a business development area as it was generally anticipated over time. Or, it could even be some kinds of conservation areas. Airports don't like wetlands, but they like open space. They like not having to fly over things and people. So there's some preservation of that. And as you saw, there's not a lot of high opportunity growth areas outside of the West Plains UGA to the southeast, which is why back, 20 slides ago, we talked about this being more that infill capability. How do we make better use of the lands that are already in this UGA? Moving on. Oh, I'm sorry. Any thoughts about that? I did miss one, that red one on the top, north of Highway 2. That's a property that is, the red dot itself is constrained by the Air Force JLUS contours. The parcels north of that are in common ownership. One of the mitigating advantages of that is it would be a transportation connection piece along the south side that Airway Heights is trying to build both east-west connections on the north and the south of Highway 2 to move more local traffic through the area and not have to be on Highway 2. So it has some other considerations. It's right between the two cities. You touch Airway Heights on one side and the city of Spokane on the other, which means it's in Spokane's water and sewer area. Anything online so far? Okay. And we'll wrap up with a different version of the UGA analysis. These are the requests that have come from the individual cities. And so in that sense, they're not part of our analysis per se. Airway Heights may be kind of a combination. And the reason for that is the county is assigned a growth number that we have to accommodate. That's what you've seen in infill. That's what you've seen in all of these slides for the last year and a half. Airway Heights in their 2023 plan identified these as future growth areas. What we need to go back and confirm with them, are you planning this for the allocation assigned to Airway Heights? Or is this allocation that would be in the county? Because that would be county UGA and we would need to account for it if that was the case. We're treating it as an Airway Heights request, which is to say we're not, at least in the numbers we're anticipating so far, this is not in that same as say that Pillar Rock neighbor would be. Airway Heights, Medical Lake, Cheney, Deer Park, all of these are slightly off the traditional approach to a UGA, and all of them have said we will support you going forward with these. However, if these are found invalid for any reason, we're not going to defend them because we're not going to put the county's plan at risk for something that we can't defend. From a planning perspective, we think they're all good planning and good growth. That area of Airway Heights is just about the only place they can grow in the near future that isn't constrained by the Air Force, isn't constrained by mining or minerals, or isn't constrained by tribal ownership. And so if in fact we are going to help them grow, that's precisely the area that's kind of that's their last remaining sweet spot. Sort of infill or short of infill development, which frankly their plan and their ideas for a kind of a downtown, they've been pretty aggressive at anticipating some infill development. So they're doing what they can with limited resources they have. Cheney, another anomaly in the sense, there's a request for a 10-acre parcel for sort of a creative housing project. I don't know if it's communal housing or not. But Cheney, in their land capacity analysis, said, we can accommodate all of our future growth in our current UGA. So again, this falls outside of that very basic UGA analysis boundary by the Growth Management Act. But it's a unique thing for Cheney, and it seems, again, from a planning perspective, why wouldn't we provide a chance for a creative housing solution when we've been trying for 5 years to provide places to build more housing? So if you think of this, and like Airway Heights too, as part of the swap versus the analysis side, Airway Heights has UGA planning on their north side. Most of that is constrained by JLUS. Half of that is the county RV park. And that's going to develop in the next 20 years in residential. Easy to say, swap out that 200 acres for 120 acres of new land and then let them grow into it. Cheney, virtually everything southeast of the rail that's in their urban growth area, and maybe not virtually everything, a large majority of that is channel scablands. It's areas that are critical areas. They should not be in urban growth. They should not have been in an urban growth area from the very beginning. And so those will be de-designated, but it feels pretty justifiable to say we'll lose 110 acres that is not going to be future UGA, but we're going to have a 10-acre addition on the north side. So again, from a planning perspective, we can defend that. Deer Park and Medical Lake. Medical Lake is very much analogous to Airway Heights. Their UGA is on their north border between them and the runway at Fairchild. Again, not a highly desirable area for residential growth. They've done some in the southeast corner of that. There's a little bit of a subdivision that's been built out there over time, and they want to continue that, and we're looking at that with them. More importantly, Mayor Cooper and her team, they want to revitalize Medical Lake as a small resort community. And the county is totally behind that effort. One of the things that I mean, obviously they were devastated by the fires in 23. And part of that was on Silver Lake, there was no fire service. There was no way to get fire flow out there. It didn't have hydrants, didn't have pipes. The west side of the lake has a single road with a one point of entry on the north, so fire apparatus couldn't even get in to address the fire. If we move urban growth out the historic highway, it can provide, sewer and water in a much closer area to that undeveloped part of it and give them a chance to grow. And they do have plenty of growth inside of the city. It's a very low density development. But is it really going to grow in multifamily parcels, or should they have an opportunity to grow that resort feel, that resort character? So again, not necessarily traditional, but a trade of a net loss of UGA land, which is again part of our mission, is to right size that UGA. And finally, Deer Park, that's a fairly substantial addition, and the map is a little confusing. Those are three almost quarter sections of land on that north side, so almost 400 acres total. The one on the upper right is already owned in fee by the city of Deer Park. It doesn't have to be in the UGA. It's not poised for development. The two parcels, or the two almost quarter sections to the west, are in ag use, but the city has acquired water rights from those parcels that they want to introduce into their domestic system. The Family Farm Water Act allows for that transfer of water rights, but it's a little bit ambiguous. We're not sure quite what it means, so we're hedging our bets at the study area. It says the water must come from lands within the UGA or transported through a UGA. So we've drawn them out here with the understanding that those will be allocated zero residential growth. And we're trying to refine, is there a special category in GMA that would allow this transfer to take place and take away the pressure of future growth out there? But so there'll be a gross change in their urban growth area, but it'll have no residential growth, except for that 40-acre parcel at the lower end of that, which is attached to some existing residential on the south side. All of the UGA lands you can see highlighted to the west of Highway 195 will be de-designated. And so again, there's a net decrease in overall UGA land for Deer Park and a significant decrease in buildable UGA lands. And one of the reasons, and they were the first to suggest the de-designation of those lands, as we were having this very broad discussion a couple of years ago. And their reason is actually very practical. It is very expensive to punch utilities under a major highway to put enough room over there for development. It's like we don't, it just isn't worth it for us. They have other places to grow. All of that said, for Deer Park, like Airway Heights, like Medical Lake, they want to grow. They're healthy. They're vibrant. And in the next 5 years, the North Spokane corridor will be connected. That's going to make it very, very easy to get to Deer Park from the Metro Core and from other areas. Again, like Bigelow Gulch Road, it's going to put development pressure on that because it'll give people a chance to live in a small town, and they could be, back in the Metro Core in 15 minutes. And so we want to work with them to say, where can you plan for growth after we get through with the 2026 plan? Dots? Mr. Chairman, that's what we have for our basic area. Oh. Okay. No. Not ignoring at all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Chesney pointed out, the development that I represent is the Cougar Cliffs development on Highway 195. To address some of the concerns that may be brought up, especially from DOT, we have existing access to Highway 195 already. It obviously isn't built out for residential development, but we've had a road directly accessing 195 for decades, before 195 was a real highway. And really our goal when it comes to developing a neighborhood center for the Latah Valley is to take car traffic off of 195 to allow people to have access to goods and services at a neighborhood center that's walkable, bikeable, that allows them to, enjoy the fruits of their neighborhood without, going on to 195. We do have extensive water rights already. Like I've said before, we've owned this property for over 65 years. We hope to build a water tower on the ridge line, and that would help to provide better water service to existing Eagle Ridge. I've met with the president of the Eagle Ridge HOA to address transportation and water access concerns, and I think I've addressed them pretty well for him. But yeah, we're trying to fit exactly the goals that Mr. Chesney has laid out in terms of neighborhood development, in terms of a real neighborhood center. And I hope that you will recommend to the Board of County Commissioners that our property be included in that study process. I know it's difficult to say all of the properties which should be included, but I feel like we really meet as many of the criteria as possible. And yes, I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Questions for Eric? Well,
Thank you.
someone's online? Okay, great. Thanks, Rob. Who's online? Who? Linnell. Linnell, you have the floor? Can you hear us?
Hi, I do. Thank you very much. I have three things to say. One of which is a question. Up at the north end by Costco, is the area forested? And where I'm going with this is my concern about logging, which we have seen up in that area now, and removing the forest and the impact that has environmentally.
Linnell, are you speaking about lands south of Newport Highway?
Oh, there you go, doing that guy stuff, north, south. Um, joke. No, it's up by the Costco. It's
Is it on the
north
same,
of Whitworth.
okay, is it on the same side of the street as Costco or not?
Either
Is-
side. I
Okay.
thought you were talking about on the other side of the street, but that was forested, and my concern is that we're logging throughout the county, and there used to be a thing called a conversion, which meant that if you logged, you couldn't build on it for X number of years. And the other part of that is that we're logging and planting a few street trees and thinking that that's going to address the climate heat that we have. So I just like a little bit more information about that. That would also apply on the area in the south that Eric just talked about.
Sure, I could give you some or some comfort on part of it. Our climate and resiliency team, which is working in parallel to the land use team, has identified tree cover and canopy as a significant effort. That technical advisory committee met last, I believe, this past Monday, and they're taking those things into consideration that will be evaluation steps in the environmental impact statement. So tree canopy, existing ecological conditions, wildlife corridors, habitat management, aquifer protection, critical areas are all factors in what that development would look like in the future. And that could be, for example, instead of allowing 10 acres to be clear cut and built out, it would require some habitat management plan that would selectively leave in parts and then replace with street trees or something like that. And that's speculative at my side, but it is being studied. It's not being ignored. From a forestry perspective, there's a timber harvesting permit that's required by the county, but I'm not aware of a conversion strategy. I will look at that. Lonnie, did you have?
Well, it could be from the olden days. My other two comments, and I feel like I'm the voice of Christmas past. In the designation of counter complete, I think that at the time, those things were applied for. We had a term when I was on the Plan Commission, and we called it throwing it through the transom. And when I reviewed a number of the applications, and I'm including the environmental impact statements and the SEPA uh, documents, the applications, N/A, which means not applicable, was on page after page after page of those applications. And I'm asking you to help us understand what counter complete really means, because being vested in this opportunity is really a an expensive thing for a person to have completed. And now that they're vested, it means that they have something of value from the county. And I think that that's would be good for us to know. And the other piece of this is for the Plan Commission. 30 years ago, we talked about having a ring road and addressing the building down towards the south. And there simply wasn't the political will to do it. And so I really respect the work that you're doing now. And you may take some hits for it, but boy, they'll thank you in 30 years. Thank you very much for doing these hearings and public participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Comments, more comments?
Well, now the one, I guess one quick thing I could address is obviously the 1993 rules are unknown to me at this time. I don't know what that would have been. I chuckled though at your description of throwing it over the transom. I can appreciate that. Whatever it was considered complete at the time, and that's why we're dealing with it now. But remember, the other comment was, if that developer wants to go forward with 1993 rules, well, then they're limited to the plat that was in fact vested, and that appears to be a series of 1 acre lots that are going to be fairly expensive to go forward. If they want to take advantage of current density of 2 to 8 or 2 to 10 units an acre in that area, they essentially have to start over. So there are some protections built into the system. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth Tellison with Winston and Cachet. And Scott, I think these are maybe just for you, so I can follow more of the preparation that you've put into this. You made a couple of comments about some parcels being de-designated from UGA. Is that being tracked separately, or is there an indication, if I look a little bit deeper in what you've prepared, that I'll be able to identify what those are?
I don't know that we have mapped them yet, but they're easy to see on the maps. It's any of the parcels that are bounded by UGA designations that are not in urban zoning. They're typically around the small Palouse towns, but also Airway Heights, Medical Lake, Cheney to some degree. Not so much anything in the metro core; those have been converted. But there's almost 1,800 acres that are bounded that are non-residential, and those will be de-designated.
My own clear. So they're within a UGA, but the zoning doesn't match urban zoning. So we've got some manner of rural zoning within a UGA designation. So they're still waiting, would potentially be waiting for a zoning update to match their UGA. If they weren't de-designated.
That would be one opportunity, but in looking at it now, all of those parcels have had 35 years to grow, and they've shown no pressure to do so. So far, in the 2015 settlement agreement, the county was, in the most simple sense, accused of having a UGA that was far too large for its 20-year growth. And so we're committed to shrinking that to a reasonable approach moving forward. We've looked at, and we're working with those small towns directly. Spangle, for example, has recently adopted a almost 200 plat subdivision within their city limit. It's under water and sewer, issues right now, but it's there. That could be 40 years of growth for that small town. Does it need a UGA? No, it just simply doesn't. And so we're kind of right sizing those small towns. The only guess is, and those of you that were here at the birth of GMA, is okay, we're going to create this thing. We're going to call it an urban growth area because that's where we want to go, but we don't really know what it means. So we're just going to draw a line around all these things and hope for the best. That's kind of how we look at it. And now 35 years later, it's time to tighten those up to be real guiding areas. So that's the philosophy behind it. It shows on the maps, but they haven't yet been highlighted as de-designated. That'll come in this next map.
The mapping that you have done I think it's the red color that is like the 6 to 7 meets the criteria. Is the consultant going to be also looking at those, or is the consultant going to be only focused on the ones that the staff is presently recommending for inclusion?
There's a distinction, maybe a nuance. It is the smaller parcels in green are not staff recommendations. They are evaluations and findings from the criteria that have identified for moving this forward. The recommendations on what's going to get studied will take those presumably as nuggets with this group, and more importantly, the Board of County Commissioners saying, perhaps in, out, expand, contract, do something else. The various colors are to give them guidance on how they fit that overall matrix of evaluation ability. But at this stage, it's not really a staff recommendation, it's a staff finding. These meet the most criteria. This would be, if we were going forward today and had to shrink 2,800 down to 300 and something, that set of parcels would get you there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comment? Go for it.
I've sent Rona an email. It is a map of the West Plains. I would just like to have you have the opportunity to see the West Plains as an entirety versus in the tiles that are necessary to display them here. I didn't put anything in the subject line, Rona, but yes, the measles. I call it the measles map. Okay, well, if you can't, I understand. I'd appreciate it. But if you could try and get it up there, it does make an impact. The reason it's called measles, it just depicts the entire 130 square miles that is the West Plains, and that it is also the West Plains aquifer system. I call it the measles map because surrounding, let's see, you're over here, so the Fairchild would be here, and the airport is here to the east. So this is west and this is east. Surrounding this entire area that is the West Plains, 130 square acres, are more than 4,000 domestic wells. And they're represented by dots, not necessarily each well. Each dot represents a well or several wells. So I just want you to know that it's a system. It's an existing system. And the discussion about let's plunk housing here and there, the wetlands are many, many wetlands out there. There's a very thin soil mantle. There is a lot of basalt. That's why there are no water systems and no sewer systems. You cannot chouse pipes into solid basalt and pick up, 12 homes per 2 miles. That's why it was zoned rural traditional. So there I see that Rona's got another on her screen here. That's I thought it was a PDF. All right, sorry about that. But the visual is extremely useful because I've not seen in the many of these presentations I've attended, I have not seen a map that shows the entire West Plains, nor does it show the entire, really even the entire population that is reliant on the only water system that's out there for private homes. For all of this time, the airport has been hooked up to the Spokane Valley Raptor Prairie Aquifer, as is Fairchild, as is all the other jazz that's out there with the waste energy plant, the casino, all of that. So they will continue to exist. those of us who are sucking it up, drinking bad water, filtrated water, we have no other options, and there is not likely to ever be another option. So the more impacts and the more threats that you have on even the West Terrace area, the more you are threatening us. Also, that area adjacent to the immediate west of the Pillar Rock Estates, all of that's the airport paleo channel. The Pillar Rock Estates was illegally granted the ability to create that subdivision when it was outside the urban growth boundary. We even prevailed at the Growth Management Hearings Board that said this is not legal, and they were vested. So I just want you to know what's going on out where I pay taxes.
I would prefer we not get involved in legalities.
Okay, that's
Thank-
all.
thank-
I just pieces of information to help you think about this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Rona. You are
Thank you.
always
Yeah.
willing. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there's an interesting nugget in that as well. We had, well, two things. One, I don't, sometimes these blur together. I don't know if we had that same critical areas discussion with you recently. But in some of our more recent Outlook meetings, we've used some of the graphics from Chad Pritchard that Ms. McHugh has alluded, some of them alluding to, that do show the greater West Plains area. So we're aware of those maps, and we'll certainly take a look at what she sent us and include it in your materials. One of the results of Spokane County's actions in 2015, and it relates to Pillar Rock and very likely to some of these other subdivisions that fell between the cracks, is the law at the time, still does. It presumes that when the county board, the legislative body, makes an action, that it is presumed legal. And what that meant in 2015 was when they adopted the 2016 or 2017 plan, for example, it was presumed that that was legal. Developers, and maybe metaphorically, showed up the next day to throw their plans over the transom, get them in and get them vested during that time. Well, the plan was challenged in the hearings board. The hearings board found for the appellants, and we spent all that time trying to fix it. But the plats that had vested before the plan was denied remained legally vested. The legislature has changed that law, so that process can no longer happen. That loophole is closed. So when we take this to the county commissioners in December, if they act to approve this plan on December 15th, yes, it's presumed valid, but nothing that is filed or changed on that plan is legally valid until the appeals period has run its course. And that could be not just the Growth Management Hearings Board, but any appeals that would go to court. And so that the loophole of something to be able to slide through while the plan is being evaluated is closed. So that won't happen in the go around for what that's worth.
Can't remember, isn't it 60 days before, even after approval, before it becomes finalized?
There's an appeal period. It's 30 or
Right.
60 days, depending on that. And true, if there's no appeal, you're done. It's valid. But if there's an appeal, say December 15th, the plan is adopted. On January 5th, if somebody files a brand new subdivision plat using neighborhood zoning, and the plan is appealed, that neighborhood zoning plan is not considered entitled or vested until the county's plan is fully adjudicated.
But, okay, I'm just trying to, it's been a few minutes since I was in planning officially. But, so if the comp plan is adopted and approved and goes through its process, but the regulations are not in place,
Oh,
that
but-
would, somebody, I think, would have filed an application under,
The regulations,
are they gonna
the
be?
regulations to implement the comprehensive plan goals and policies must be adopted at the same time as the plan.
I understand that, but are you that far along? The regulations are running right along here?
Well, when you see kind of the conceptual statements up here, that translates into code language pretty directly. And remember, a lot of the code we're talking about is not created out of whole cloth. It's codes that could be adapted from model codes in other areas. So yeah, we've got some progress on that we'll be sharing as this moves along.
I was gonna say, because I haven't seen any,
No,
so.
well, it's premature.
Conceptual.
It's premature until we get both through today and through Monday with some direction on where we're going to talk about growth and the degree of what that growth is going to look like, studied through the EIS. In the meantime, we're doing a parallel process as if it's going to be ultimately approved, so we're not too far behind. If that's the case, then we'll be in good shape come April, May, June.
Any other comments? From the audience? You may. Yeah, yeah, would please.
My name is Lee Trevino. I'm just a property owner up on 5 Mile, hoping to get included. And I just had a question for Mr. Chesney about the 1,800 acres that you estimate will be de-designated. So say, for example, if like there were 2,800 acres that were requested to be included, would the 1,800 acres be part of that? So, no?
The de-designated acreage is currently in a UGA. It just isn't at urban zoning densities. It's generally around our small towns. There's almost none of that in the metro core. Oh, no, in this growth area, no, because there is no sufficient development pressure on those to consider the urban area. So those do not factor into the 2,800 or to the 300 or 400.
Thank you.
Oh, no, no worries.
Going once, going twice, anyone online? Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Chairman.
much, Mr. Chesney. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of November to the 13th. You have a copy of the minutes. I've read them. Hopefully everyone else has read them. Are there any changes, errors, or things that need to be noted before we ask for adoption of the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
So we adopt the minutes by Clyde. Second by Lane. All those in favor of adopting those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying no. The ayes have it. Those minutes are hereby adopted. The next meeting, January 15th and January 29th, but before we move to adjournment, staff report.
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, it's just a reminder that we will be having this discussion with the county board on Monday, the 15th, after which that will be summarized in a report to our environmental impact consultants. And from that point on, some of this goes into a slow period where they will start doing the transportation modeling based on parcels selected in this recommend or in this set of findings. And then we will be pursuing the other GMA chapters, which will be part of the preview that you will see in your first meeting in January.
Any question for staff or for Scott? Not the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Melissa. Second by Lonnie. Without discussion, all those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying no. We hereby adjourn. It's 10:45. Thank you.
Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yes, Merry Christmas. We'll see you next year. Get some work done, Scott, please. We'll go with the holiday. Merry Christmas. Stay safe on those.